This is the story of William Murdock, the first man to have gas. I think you know what I mean. If you enjoy this video, why not give it a like? And why not subscribe if you haven't done so already and share it with your friends? Okay, let's go. If you ask most people who invented gaslighting, they would probably say it was William Murdock. No, not the officer from the Titanic, the other Scottish one. It's fair to say that he was the first person to invent a practical system of gaslighting, but in fact, coal gas had been discovered about 100 years earlier by John Clayton in northwest England. Details, however, are a bit sketchy, to say the least. In fact, there are archaeological remains of natural gas extraction in China from 500 BC and Iran from the 1st century AD, but neither of these technologies continued into the modern era. A contemporary of Murdock, Philippe Le Bon, in Paris, also devised gaslighting, but it was William Murdock who really made a working system work. William Murdock was born in 1754 in a small village in Ayrshire, Scotland. Like a lot of the people I've spoken about in these videos, he was a tinkerer. He was interested in just about everything around him. It is said that in 1772 he found that he could make inflammable gas by heating coal in his mother's teapot. The gas that came out of the spout could be ignited. It's not clear what his mother thought about him putting coal into a perfectly serviceable teapot. I guess we'll never know. In 1777, he went to Birmingham and applied for a job at the great engineering firm of Boulton and Watt. Both partners recognised that this young man had great potential and gave him a job. He stayed with the firm for the next 53 years. Just to clarify, James Watt, another Scot, is often mistakenly credited with the invention of the steam engine. In fact, he greatly improved the existing Newcomen atmospheric engine, no mean feat, and teamed up with the canny Birmingham businessman Matthew Boulton. James Watt was an otherworldly inventor with absolutely no business sense, while Matthew Boulton had business sense by the bucketful. The combination of Watt's genius and Boulton's drive and business sense made Boulton and Watt one of the most successful companies of the period. As a result of their patents, they effectively had a monopoly over most steam technology from 1775 until 1800. Boulton and Watt sold their new steam engines all over the world, and a large number of them to the Cornish mines. And Murdock spent several years in Cornwall looking after the company's interests there. While he was there, he started experimenting with steam-propelled vehicles. He developed several early models. There is a story that on one evening he set his machine working in a lane near a local church. It just so happened that the vicar was walking home along the lane and saw the machine in the twilight, belching flames and smoke. He ran off, convinced that he was being visited by the devil. When Boulton and Watt heard about Murdock's experiments, they gave him a choice: continue with the experiments or continue working for them. Murdock chose security and put his experiments on hold. The Cornishman Richard Trevithick, with whom Murdock is thought to have been acquainted, went on to build the first working steam vehicles some years later. That is the subject of a video I made some months ago, and a link to this is in the description below. William Murdock's thoughts returned to gaslighting, and in 1792 he successfully lit his house in Redruth, Cornwall, using coal gas. When Murdock returned to Birmingham, he was given a cottage in the Soho foundry in Birmingham and installed gaslighting, first in his cottage and then throughout the factory. He also installed gaslighting for the Phillips and Lee cotton mill in Manchester. Boulton and Watt, and indeed Murdock himself, could have taken out a patent for the gaslighting system and made a fortune. Matthew Boulton refused to patent gaslighting, saying that they had enough patents already with their steam engines and other technologies. Who knows why William Murdock didn't take out a patent? So none of them made a penny out of Murdock's brightest idea. Pun intended. Some years later, Murdock returned to making experimental steam engines, but that's another story. So where did the gas come from for the gas lighting system? Although something was known about natural gas, it was difficult to extract and store with the technology of the age. The way to make gas is basically to use a larger version of Mrs. Murdock's teapot. As you can see, coal is heated in a closed chamber called retorts. The gas that escapes is hot and dirty. It passes through a condenser and then through water where the tar is removed, and then a purifier where the gas is scrubbed. The purified gas goes into storage in a gasometer. There are lots of variations of this, but early gasworks tended to work more or less in this way. The really neat trick was that once the gas had been extracted from the coal, what was left was coke, coal with the gas taken out. Coke is a great fuel, and some of it was used to power the furnace to make more gas. The rest was sold off as a smokeless fuel. The first public street lit with gas was in Pall Mall in London in 1807. This marked the beginning of the practical application of gas lighting for urban areas. Following this success, other cities all over the world started adopting gas street lighting. This was just the start. It didn't take long for gas lighting to be applied in factories and in private houses. There were safety concerns, but bit by bit, burners, distribution systems and so on made the whole thing safer and more reliable. And gas started to take over from coal for heating and cooking, as well as lighting. The impact on the urban environment, be it in the streets or indoors, was immense. People were astonished to see night turning into day. Gas-lit houses may seem dim by our standards, but they were radiant when compared to what most people had before. The large gasometers like this dominated the skylines of most towns. These gasometers were telescopic. The more gas pumped into them, the taller they got. There was a simple water seal between each section. Bit by bit, a lot of countries moved from coal gas, often known as town gas because every town made its own, to natural gas. Oddly enough, Britain was one of the last countries to do this, mainly because of its large coal reserves. In the 1970s, enough gas was being produced from the offshore gas fields to convert the country to what is now known as North Sea gas, but I'm getting ahead of myself. In the early 20th century, gas faced competition from a new competitor, electricity. Just as gas replaced previous sources of energy for lighting, cooking and heating, electricity evolved in the same way in most developed countries. By the mid-20th century, the majority of houses and street lighting was electric. Gas cooking and gas central heating are also predicted to decline. Indeed, it is government policy in many countries around the world to make this happen. We'll see. As it happens, gas, like coal before it, will probably continue to be used to generate electricity, at least for quite some time to come. However, much as these fuels pollute, I don't think it's likely that they'll be discontinued anytime soon, because the great thing about generating electricity with any fuel, however polluting it is that it can be ignored when the power stations are a long way from home. Bye for now.